Alien death squadron surrounded him, then he smiled and asked, "Who goes first?" The jump from null space tore 4 perfect wounds in the fabric of reality. Starlight bent, bruised, and broke around the quartet of Vorlog assault ships as they materialized in silent, predatory unison. They were obsidian needles, matte black and sharp, designed to pierce the heart of a system without a whisper of warning. Inside the command needle, Caldara stood bolted to the deck, her crimson skin a stark contrast to the cool, blue light of the hollow displays. Her horns, thick and ridged like ancient rock, seemed to absorb the light, leaving nothing but shadow. "Status," she commanded, her voice a low vibration that promised violence. "No transmissions, no orbital infrastructure. 1 planet, Class G, unremarkable." Tyleth, the squadron's technician, reported from her station. Her pale blue skin was bathed in the glow of her console, her small, delicate horns almost invisible against the cascade of her white hair. "But the energy signature is confirmed. Deep, ancient, and powerful. And stable. It isn't a natural phenomenon." "A weapon?" Vexara's voice was a rasp, like stone grinding on steel. She didn't look up from the weapons locker she was calibrating, her emerald green skin gleaming under the maintenance lights. Her horns were like black daggers, sharp and efficient as the rest of her. "Or a tomb," Caldara mused. "The Ascendancy commands this sector be cleansed before the reclamation fleet arrives. We will not be delayed by ghosts." She turned her gaze to the 4th sister, who stood apart from the others, watching the swirling ochre and maroon globe of the planet on the main screen. "Vera, what do you feel?" Vera, the youngest, closed her luminous amethyst eyes. Her lavender skin seemed to soften, her pointed ears twitching almost imperceptibly. She was the empath, the blade that slipped between the ribs of the soul. "It is quiet," she said, her voice melodic and clear. "So quiet, there is a weight, a patience, a single point of consciousness, like a mountain that has been waiting for the rain for 1,000 years. It is alone." Curled, solitude breeds weakness. Pinpoint the source, Tyleth. We descend. The teleportation was a brief, nauseating shimmer of atoms. They materialized in perfect combat formation, weapons raised, in a chamber so vast it stole the breath. The walls were made of a seamless, pearlescent material that glowed with a soft internal light. There were no adornments, no signs of life, only a profound humming silence. And in the center of the chamber, on a simple dais, a man sat in a high-backed chair. He was human. Based on the lost records, he was impossibly, archaically human. His dark hair was sharply cut, his body a roadmap of muscle and tattooed lines depicting star charts that hadn't been seen in millennia. He wore a dark, open tactical vest over a bare, sculpted chest and cargo pants tucked into worn boots. He wasn't restrained. He was simply waiting. As the 4 sisters of the Vorlog Death Squadron fanned out to surround him, their plasma rifles humming, he slowly raised his head. His eyes, steady and impossibly old, met each of theirs in turn. Then a slow smile touched his lips, a crack in the stoic mask of his face. He leaned forward slightly, his voice calm, clear, and carrying in the immense space. "Who goes first?" The silence that followed was heavier than the one they had arrived in. Caldara felt a surge of pure rage at the audacity. This was defiance on a scale her zealous heart could not comprehend. This was not the fear of the lesser species they were sent to purge. This was something else entirely. She took a step forward, her rifle aimed squarely between the human's eyes. "I am Caldara of the Vorlog Ascendancy," she snarled, "and you are a relic trespassing on sacred ground. You will identify yourself in this place or you will be erased." The man, Roman, simply watched her, his smile never wavering. He felt the century of solitude settle around him not as a weakness, but as armor. He had rehearsed this moment in one form or another 1,000 times in his dreams. He had watched the archive's long-range sensors track the slow, cancerous spread of the Vorlog for decades, and he knew what they were. They were an answer to a question he had long been tasked to ask. He rose from the chair, a smooth yet unhurried motion that was a challenge in itself. The 4 plasma rifles tracked him, muzzles unwavering. He was unarmed, his hands open at his sides. "I am Roman," he said, his voice resonating with a quiet authority that belied his position. "And this is the Soul Archive. Trespassing is a human concept. Here, you are simply unexpected." He took a step off the dais, and Vexara's finger tightened on her trigger. He ignored her. You may lower your weapons. You are guests for now. We are not guests, Keldara corrected, her voice dripping with contempt. We are judgment. Roman's gaze flickered to her, then to each of her sisters. Then your judgment is based on incomplete data. I am granting you limited access to the outer sectors of the archive. A gesture of goodwill. You will find guest quarters, atmospheric processors, and nutrient synthesizers. You may remain for one cycle. After that, you will leave this system. You are in no position to make demands, Keldara hissed. And you are in no position to understand where you are, Roman countered, his tone perfectly level. Consider it a professional courtesy. He turned his back on them then, a move so utterly dismissive it left even Keldara momentarily speechless. He walked toward a wall that dissolved into an archway of light at his approach. Vera, he called out without looking back. The name hung in the air, a perfect, unexpected note. Vera flinched, her mind reeling. He knew her name. He hadn't been scanned. He couldn't have known. Your leader will want a report on my weaknesses, Roman continued. Come, let's not keep her waiting. Keldara's eyes narrowed. This was a trap. Or it was madness. Either way, it was an opportunity. Go, she commanded Vera. Flay his mind. Find the command codes for this archive. I want to know what gives a dead species such arrogance. Vera hesitated for a fraction of a second. Her amethyst eyes locked on Roman's broad, tattooed back as he disappeared through the archway. She felt a tremor of something alien to her. Not fear, but a deep, unnerving curiosity. She gave a curt nod to her sister and followed the human into the light. The room he led her to was as sterile as the first, containing only 2 chairs facing each other. The air was cold, recycled, and carried the faint, clean scent of energized circuits. There was nothing here but the hum of the station and the man who was its heart. You may begin when you are ready, Roman said, settling into one of the chairs and closing his eyes, his hands resting on his knees. He looked for all the world like a man preparing for meditation, not a mental violation. Vera stood before him, her training warring with the profound wrongness of the situation. Her purpose was to be a scalpel, to slice into a mind and extract what was needed, leaving ruin in her wake. But the patient was offering her his throat. She slowly sat, her form-fitting armor groaning softly. She reached out with her consciousness, a tendril of psychic energy, and touched his mind. She braced for shields, for traps, for a psychic maelstrom. She found nothing. Only an open door, and on the other side, an ocean. She stepped through and was immediately drowned. It was not a violent flood, but an absolute immersion. She felt the searing heat of a star on her skin, a star she had never seen, the star he called soul. She tasted salt on her tongue from an ocean of water, felt the rough bark of a tree under her fingertips, heard the complex, soaring notes of a forgotten human composer, a sound so beautiful it made her soul ache with a longing she had never known. It was a torrent of sensory data, unprocessed and overwhelming. She was in his memories. She saw the face of a woman, her expression soft with a love so deep it was a physical force, and then the gut-wrenching pain of her loss. She felt the weight of 100 years of silence, the crushing loneliness of watching the stars turn while bound to one place. She felt his awe at the universe, his weary resolve, his flicker of hope at their arrival. It was too much. It was everything. It was the totality of a human life, a species life, poured directly into her mind. She gasped, a raw, strangled sound in the quiet room, and ripped her consciousness away. She was on her knees, her body trembling, her mind reeling from the aftershocks of a billion alien sensations. Roman opened his eyes. They were filled with a deep, ancient sadness. I know, he said softly. It's a lot to take in. The quiet, compassion in his voice was more devastating than any psychic attack. Her conditioning, her training, her entire identity had been built on the premise of alien inferiority, of cold logic and the supremacy of the Vorlog. In a single moment, this human had shown her a universe of feeling that made her own existence seem like a pale, monochrome shadow. A single, traitorous tear traced a path down her lavender cheek. Keldara's patience had evaporated. Hours had passed and Vera had not returned. Jalira's scans of the archive were proving useless. The walls were woven from some kind of self-repairing exotic matter that defied analysis. Every attempt to hack the system was met with a passive, impenetrable wall of logic. Enough of this game, Keldara's voice echoed through their private comm channel. Vexara, you have your orders. The relic is hiding his controls in the central core. A kinetic assault will bypass any energy shielding he may have. Breach it. Acknowledged, Vexara's voice rasped back. In the archive's central nexus, alarms Roman hadn't heard in his lifetime chimed softly. On a massive holo display that erupted from the floor, he watched a schematic of Vexara's fire team advancing on the core chamber. He sighed, a sound of genuine regret. Vera, who had finally composed herself and was sitting silently in her chair, looked at him, her eyes wide with alarm. "They will destroy everything," she whispered. "No, they won't," Roman said, a strange mix of sadness and pride in his voice. He placed his palm on a console, and the pearlescent walls of the room pulsed with a golden light. "The archive is not a weapon. It's a guardian, and guardians are very, very good at stopping people from hurting themselves." Vexara's team reached the core's blast doors. They were thick, impenetrable, and ancient. "Breaching charges set," Vexara reported. "Detonating." The explosion was completely silent. The charges flashed, but their concussive force was swallowed by the air itself. A shimmering field of localized gravity had sprung up an inch from the door, absorbing every joule of energy. "Report," Keldara demanded. "Charges had no effect," Vexara stated, her voice tight with disbelief, switching to plasma cutters. As the beams of white-hot energy lanced out, the wall in front of them seemed to ripple, its molecular structure shifting. The plasma beams passed harmlessly through the now transparent section of the wall and dissipated against the far side of the corridor. The wall solidified a moment later, completely unscathed. "Impossible," Tylith breathed over the comm from the ship. "They're manipulating space-time at a localized level. That's..." She trailed off, unable to complete the sentence. "Keep firing," Keldara ordered, her voice shaking with fury. As the squadron unleashed a volley of plasma bolts and kinetic rounds, the very architecture of the archive came alive. Sections of the floor lowered, creating impassable chasms. Walls slid into place, rerouting the soldiers into harmless loops. Finally, a fine silvery mist filled the corridors. It was a swarm of nanites, not the flesh-eating plagues of Vorlag legend, but something far more elegant. They flowed over the soldiers' rifles, harmlessly disassembling them into their base components, which then clattered to the floor in neat, useless piles. Within minutes, Vexara's elite fire team stood disarmed and utterly defeated, trapped in a shifting maze, not a scratch on them. The message was clear: we can dismantle your violence atom by atom. Do not try this again. The truce that followed was born not of respect but of necessity. Keldara, humiliated and seething, was forced to recall her troops. They were confined to the guest quarters Roman had provided, their every move monitored by the passive, omniscient archive. The balance of power had shifted so completely that it had inverted. The Four Sisters were no longer conquerors. They were prisoners in a cage without bars. Vera, however, was granted continued access to Roman. Her mission was now officially to negotiate, but both she and Roman knew it was something more. She found herself seeking him out, drawn by the chaotic, beautiful ocean of his mind. "You have to let me see it again," she said one cycle later, finding him in an observatory where the walls had become a perfect, seamless window into the star-dusted void. "Not your memories, the archive, the source code. What I felt, it was more than just a defense system. There was a purpose, a warning." Roman looked at her, his gaze intense. He saw the conflict in her, the war between a lifetime of conditioning and the nascent spark of truth. He saw the woman she could be, not just the soldier she was made to be. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "The truth can be a heavy burden, but you have a right to see it, and I have been alone with it for too long." He led her back to the interface room. This time, as she sat, there was no hostility, only a tense, shared anticipation. "Don't just look," he said, his voice a low murmur. "Participate. Ask the question you came here to answer. Ask it of the archive." Vera closed her eyes and reached out. She bypassed the raw emotion of his personal memories and pushed deeper, guided by his silent will. She shaped her intent into a single query. "What is your purpose?" The response was not in words, but in pure data, a stream of history that flooded her consciousness. She saw the rise of humanity, their expansion into the stars, their first contact with dozens of species. But then she saw what they found in the deep, silent spaces between galaxies. A horror, a living hunger that moved in the dark, a devourer of systems, a static that consumed life and light. She saw humanity's desperate, galaxy-spanning war, not for conquest, but for preservation. And she saw their final act, retreating, hiding their worlds, and leaving behind silent guardians like Aegis, not as weapons of conquest, but as lighthouses built to shine a warning when the long night came again. As this truth settled into her, it triggered something deeper, a resonance within her own genetic code. A new vision slammed into her, this one from her own people. It was a memory 1,000,000 years old. She saw the ancient Vorlog, not as conquerors, but as astronomers, philosophers. She heard them speak of the great devourer that consumed their celestial neighbors, and she heard the prophecy of their salvation. A race of short-lived but brilliant allies who would fall silent to build a defense, and the silent guardian who would hold the key. Her people's entire history, their crusade of reclamation, was a corruption, a twisted misinterpretation of a warning meant to prepare them for an alliance. They weren't meant to purge the galaxy, they were meant to help save it. And the relic they had come to destroy was the very guardian their oldest legends had prophesied. Vera pulled back from the interface, a single, sharp cry escaping her lips. The truth was a physical blow. She looked at Roman, her eyes shimmering with tears of revelation and shame. "You," she whispered, her voice cracking. "It was always you." Roman's expression was somber. He reached out, not with his mind, but with his hand, and gently brushed the tear from her cheek. His touch was warm, solid, and impossibly real. It was a simple gesture of comfort, but for Vera, whose entire life had been one of sterile discipline and duty, it was a cataclysm. "We were meant to be your allies," she choked out, the words tasting like poison. "My entire life, our entire purpose, it's a lie." He didn't speak. He simply moved his hand from her cheek to her own hand, his fingers lacing with hers. The contact was electric, a grounding force in the storm of her shattered reality. In that moment, the war between their species, the tension of their standoff, all of it melted away, leaving only two people in a silent room, bound by a truth that could either save the galaxy or tear it apart. The sterile air between them grew heavy, charged with something more potent than any weapon. It was the birth of trust, a fragile, terrifying, and beautiful thing. Her gaze fell to their joined hands, then rose back to his eyes. The questions in her gaze were no longer tactical, but deeply personal. He held her stare, giving her the one thing no one in her life ever had: a choice. In the quiet hum of the ancient human machine, a Vorlog soldier began to feel the stirrings of a faith she never knew she had lost. Not in an empress or a crusade, but in the last, lonely man at the end of the universe. Their time was cut short by the blare of a priority alert. Jalira's voice, tight with panic, echoed from Vera's wrist comm. "Sister, the reclamation fleet is here. They've jumped into the system 63 cycles ahead of schedule. The Empress is demanding a full report." Before Vera could respond, Keldara's voice overrode the channel, cold and triumphant. "I will handle the report." A hollow display flickered to life between Roman and Vera, showing Keldara on the bridge of her needle, her crimson face set like stone. Behind her, the vast, menacing shapes of the Vorlag fleet filled the view screen. "Majesty," Keldara began, her voice ringing with false deference, "the anomaly is a human bastion, ancient and hostile. The entity within has taken my sister's hostage with some unknown psychic weapon. He is too powerful to be taken by ground assault. The archive must be sterilized from orbit. I request permission to commence bombardment." Vera stared in horror. "Keldara, no. You know that's not what happened." Keldara's eyes, burning with zealotry, met hers through the screen. "You have been compromised, Vera. Your empathy has made you weak. The guardian of Vorlog prophecy would not be a primitive human. He is a defiler, and this is a test of our faith." To the fleet, she commanded, "Charge main cannons. Target the energy source on my mark." Vera felt the blood drain from her face. Her sister, blinded by dogma, was about to make a mistake that would doom them all. She looked at Roman, her heart pounding with a terror that was not for herself, but for him, for the truth, for the future. He met her gaze, his own eyes calm. waiting. The choice was still hers. Vera didn't hesitate. "Jalira, Vexara, listen to me," she transmitted on a private channel, her voice low and urgent. "Keldara is lying. The human is not our enemy. He is the guardian. The archive is the key to our survival, not a threat." "My analysis of the archive's defensive capabilities showed no lethal intent," Tyleth's voice came back, hesitant but analytical. "The probability that Keldara's report is emotionally compromised is high." "He defeated us without a fight," Vexara added, her tone grudging but clear. "There is strength in that, a strength Keldara does not understand." That was all Vera needed. "Then you must trust me. Do what you can to delay the fleet. I am going back to him." She severed the connection before Keldara could countermand and turn to Roman, her eyes blazing with a newfound purpose. "She won't listen. We have to show them." Her voice was steady now, all traces of fear replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "You said the archive's true function required two minds. You have mine." Roman studied her face, searching for any hint of doubt. He found none. He saw not a Vorlog soldier, but an ally, a partner. "The process is total," he warned, his voice grave. "It's a complete fusion of consciousness. There are no barriers, no secrets. You will see all of me, and I, all of you. It may change us irrevocably." "Good," Vera said, her lips setting into a firm line. "I am weary of what I was." She stepped toward the central interface, a cradle-like structure that hummed with latent power. "I am ready." He nodded and moved to the twin cradle beside it. This was the final gambit, an act of ultimate trust and intimacy, far beyond the simple touch of their hands. As the Vorlag fleet's weapon ports glowed with imminent fire, two beings, one an ancient human, the other a bioengineered alien, prepared to merge their souls to save a galaxy that had forgotten them both. The bombardment began. Lances of pure energy, each capable of cracking a continent, screamed down from orbit. They never reached the surface. A shimmering golden dome of energy bloomed over the archive, deflecting the blasts harmlessly into space. On the bridge of her needle, Keldara watched in disbelief as Jalira's panicked voice filled the comms. "Sister! The fleet is firing! I cannot stop them!" "They are firing on my command," Keldara snarled. "But the Guardian is our ally," Tyleth protested. "The Guardian is a lie sent to test us." Down in the core, Roman and Vera lowered themselves into their respective interface cradles. As the machinery closed around them, Roman looked over at her one last time. "There is no turning back." "I'm not looking back," Vera replied, her amethyst eyes locking with his. He gave her a small, sad smile. "Then let's show them what humanity remembers." He closed his eyes, and the interface hummed to life. Vera felt a jolt, a current of pure information that bypassed her senses and went straight to her soul. Then his mind met hers. It was not the overwhelming flood of before. This was a deliberate, gentle intertwining. His loneliness, a vast, quiet sea, washed over her, and she answered it with the sharp, disciplined sting of her own manufactured existence. She felt his memory of the sun on his face, and he felt her memory of the cold, recycled air of 1,000 starships. His grief for a long-lost love met her confusion about an emotion she was only just beginning to understand. It was a torrent of sensation, erotic in its totality, spiritual in its depth. They saw through each other's eyes, felt with each other's skin, loved with each other's hearts. The rigid lines of her Vorlog identity dissolved and the hardened shell of his solitude cracked open. They were no longer human and Vorlog. They were one consciousness, ancient and new, and they were beautiful. Together, they reached into the heart of the archive. They felt its immense power, the sleeping giant of human ingenuity. They bypassed the devastating weapon systems, the planet killers and starbreakers, and searched for its true purpose. They found it. Not a weapon, but a voice, a broadcaster of truth. With a final unified push of their combined will, they activated it. Across the Vorlog fleet, every view screen, every data slate, every mind was filled with the broadcast. They saw the true history, the uncorrupted prophecy. They saw the devourer, a thing of pure hunger from the dark between galaxies. And they saw the last lonely act of a dying human empire, building a beacon of hope for the allies they would never meet. They saw Roman, not as a defiler, but as the guardian, the one their oldest stories had promised. The firing stopped. An absolute stunned silence fell over the entire fleet. The decoupling was a gentle release, a slow separation of two threads that would forever remain intertwined. Vera gasped, her body slumping in the cradle, every nerve alight with the phantom sensations of Roman's memories. Roman himself felt a profound sense of peace settle over him, the crushing weight of his solitude finally, blessedly lifted. He was no longer alone in his own mind. A part of her was with him now, a warm, bright presence. They helped each other from the interfaces, their movements unsteady, their hands finding each other's as if by instinct. A chime echoed through the chamber, a single clear voice, regal and filled with a humility that had been absent before, spoke from the comm system. It was the Vorlag Empress. She did not address Keldara, she addressed the archive. "Guardian," the Empress said, her voice heavy with the weight of revelation, "we have been mistaken. Forgive us." Roman looked at Vera, her hand still held firmly in his. He squeezed it gently. "There is nothing to forgive," he said, his voice carrying the strength of two souls. "There is only the work that needs to be done." The alliance was forged not in treaties or political maneuvering, but in a shared, undeniable truth. Keldara was recalled, her command stripped, her zealotry left to fester in the face of a reality she could not deny. Vera, the sister who had seen the truth, was named the official liaison to the Sol Archive and its guardian. Her new purpose was clear, to bridge the gap between her people and the human who had shown them the way. Days later, they stood together in the observatory, watching the Vorlag fleet, no longer a threat, but a shield, rearrange itself into a defensive formation around Aegis. The silence between them was no longer one of loneliness or tension, but of comfortable, profound understanding. "It's strange," Vera murmured, her head resting against his shoulder. The gesture was new to her, yet it felt more natural than anything she had ever done. "For my entire life, I was taught that humanity was a chaotic, primitive species, that your emotions were your greatest weakness." Roman looked down at her violet hair, her elegant horns, her eyes that had seen into his very soul. He smiled, a genuine warm expression that reached his eyes for the first time in a century. "They are," he said softly, "and our greatest strength." He was no longer the last sentinel, a lonely ghost guarding a tomb. He was humanity's ambassador, its memory and its future. And with Vera's hand in his, he knew he was finally home. The devourer was still out there, in the dark, but for the first time there was a light waiting for it, and they would face it together. 3 years. In the silent, timeless expanse of the archive, 3 years was the blink of an eye. For Roman, who had once measured time in lonely decades, it was a lifetime. Aegis was no longer a tomb. The pearlescent halls, once echoing with the footfalls of a single man, now bustled with the quiet, purposeful energy of the Sentinel Alliance. Vorlag scientists in their severe, elegant robes moved alongside the handful of specialists from the newly contacted Signian Confederacy, their crystalline carapaces shimmering under the soft internal light. The air, once sterile and unchanging, now carried the faint, loamy scent of the hydroponic gardens Roman had established, a touch of Earth's soil in the heart of an alien world. His quarters were no longer the Spartan cell he had maintained for a century. Vera had insisted. The space was now a fusion of two cultures, a testament to their life together. A low, comfortable human-style sofa was draped with a Vorlag meditation cloth, its geometric patterns shifting in the light. A data slate showing Vorlag military formations sat on a table carved from rich, dark wood salvaged from Roman's own memory stores in the archive's fabricators. It was their home. He stood by the large window, a perfect, transparent wall looking out over a newly cultivated valley. He was watching Tyleth and a team of Vorlag engineers calibrate a massive atmospheric sensor array. Since the Alliance, the blue-skinned technician had become the archive's most fervent student, her logical mind finding a sublime beauty in the elegant simplicity of human code. She and Roman spent cycles together, deciphering the deepest secrets of the station, her initial suspicion long since replaced by a profound academic reverence. A familiar warmth bloomed in his mind, a soft touch of amethyst and lavender that was more intimate than any physical caress. "You are thinking too loudly, Roman." Vera's mental voice was a melody that resonated perfectly with his own thoughts. He didn't turn as she came to stand beside him, her lithe form pressing against his side. He could feel her, not just the physical contact, but the gentle current of her emotions, the quiet contentment that was her baseline now. He slipped an arm around her waist, his hand resting on the smooth, cool fabric of her tunic. "I was just appreciating the paradox," he sent back, a thought more than words. "A weapon of last resort has become a university." "It was never a weapon," she corrected gently. "It was a library with teeth. You simply taught us how to read." She tilted her head, her vibrant purple hair brushing against his bare shoulder. Her pointed ears twitched, a sign of amusement he had come to cherish. "Tyleth believes she has unlocked the core fabrication schematics. She says the archive can build anything, as long as the user understands the principles behind it." "It can," Roman confirmed. "That was always humanity's greatest strength. We didn't just create things, we understood them." Vera's gaze followed his out the window. Vexara was down there too, sparring with a squad of Vorlag Praetorians. The green-skinned warrior moved with a lethal grace, her body a blur of controlled violence. But the weapon in her hands was not a plasma rifle. It was a simple, weighted human quarterstaff. She was teaching them close-quarters combat, the brutal, efficient art of leverage and momentum that Roman had shown her from the archive's historical martial records. The Vorlag, with their superior strength, were confounded by the simple physics of it. Vexara, who respected only power, had found a new definition of the word in Roman's tactics. She was now the commander of the Joint Alliance fleet, her loyalty to Roman and Vera absolute, forged in the crucible of her squadron's defeat and the undeniable truth that followed. "Two of my sisters have found a new purpose here," Vera thought, a hint of sadness coloring the edges of her mind. Roman tightened his grip, pulling her closer. He felt the target of her melancholy without needing to ask. Keldara, the eldest sister, the proudest, the most broken. "She will find her way," he projected, infusing the thought with as much certainty as he could muster. Vera leaned her head on his chest, her horns cool against his skin. She closed her eyes, sharing in the quiet strength he offered. Their bond was the true miracle of the Alliance. The mental fusion they had undergone to activate the archive had not been a temporary measure. A link remained, a permanent, empathic connection that bound them soul to soul. He felt her moods as if they were his own, a subtle shift in his emotional landscape. She, in turn, had access to the deep, steady well of his human resilience. It was an intimacy so complete that words often felt clumsy and redundant. His hands slid from her waist, his fingers gently tracing the elegant curve of her horn. The sensitive cartilage tingled at his touch, and he felt a shiver of pleasure pass through her, a sensation that was echoed faintly in his own nerves. Her amethyst eyes opened, dark and heavy with affection. "The Empress has requested a formal update on the archive's historical database," she murmured, her lips brushing against his collarbone. "She is particularly interested in the human concept of poetry." Roman chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "I'll send her the file on Shakespeare. That should keep the entire Vorlag High Command busy for a decade." He bent his head, his lips finding hers. The kiss was soft, familiar, a universe of shared experience contained in a single moment. It was a life he had never dared to imagine, a peace he had never thought he would know. But even in this perfect quiet, he could feel the deep, resonant hum of the archive around them, a constant reminder of its true purpose. The library had teeth for a reason, and in the silent depths of space, the darkness was stirring. Keldara lived in the shadow of the mountain. The Alliance had repurposed one of Aegis's polar regions into a Spartan enclave for Vorlag soldiers still acclimating to the new reality. Most passed through, but Keldara remained. She had chosen a dwelling at the very edge of the settlement, a stark black rock shelter that faced a glacier of permanent blue-tinged ice. It suited the frozen landscape of her soul. Her days were a rigid routine of physical training and meditation, but she found no peace. The truth she had been shown had not liberated her, it had hollowed her out. Her faith, her purpose, her very identity as the Empress's judgment had been a lie. Her pride, the bedrock of her existence, was now a source of burning, constant shame. She was sparring with a training drone, her movements filled with a rage that had no target. She shattered the machine with a final brutal kick, sending its components skittering across the frozen ground. She stood panting in the thin, cold air, her crimson skin flushed, her breath misting around her. Your anger is a shield, sister, but it protects you from nothing. Keldara spun around. Vera stood a dozen paces away, her simple gray tunic a stark contrast to the black of Keldara's combat suit. She looked smaller here, more fragile against the ice and rock. You should not have come, Keldara snarled, her voice raw. I miss my sister, Vera said simply, taking a tentative step forward. The sister you knew is dead, Keldara shot back, her hands clenching into fists. She died in that chamber when she chose a human relic over her own blood, her own empress. I chose the truth, Keldara, the truth that was stolen from us both, from all of us. The truth? Keldara laughed, a harsh, broken sound. The truth is that our entire history is a farce. Our great crusade was a child's misreading of a bedtime story, and that human, he watched us. He let us live in our ignorance for decades, a god in his machine, judging us. He was alone, Vera said softly, and he did not judge. He waited. He upheld his duty, just as you always taught us to uphold ours. The words struck a chord, and Keldara's anger wavered, replaced by a wave of gut-wrenching grief. Our duty was a lie. The mission was a lie, Vera corrected, stepping closer still. The duty was not. Our purpose was always to protect our people. We were simply aimed at the wrong enemy. She was only an arm's length away now, her amethyst eyes pleading. I did not come here to ask for your forgiveness. I came to ask for your help. Keldara stared at her, her expression a mask of confusion and pain. Help? How can I help you? You have your human. You have the archive. What use is a broken soldier whose faith is ash? Vera reached out, her hand hovering just inches from Keldara's arm. She didn't touch her. Not physically. Instead, she opened their sisterly bond, a connection she hadn't used in years, and poured out not an argument, but her own feelings. She let Keldara feel her love for Roman, a warm, steady light that was both terrifying and beautiful. She let her feel the profound weight of the coming darkness, the cold dread of the devourer's approach, and she let her feel her deepest, most vulnerable truth, her fear. I am afraid, Keldara, Vera whispered, her voice trembling. I love him, but he is only one man. The archive is a miracle, but it is just a tool. The Vorlag are warriors, but we are proud and divided. Tyleth is a genius, but she thinks in code. Vexara is strong, but she sees only the fight in front of her. You were always the one who saw the path. You were the one who led us. I learned leadership from you. I learned strength from you. My love for Roman does not change the fact that I need my sister. The raw, unfiltered emotion washed over Keldara. It bypassed her anger, her pride, her shame, and struck the core of who she was, the eldest, the protector. For 3 years she had nursed her wounds in isolation. For 3 years she had defined herself by what she had lost. Vera was offering her a new definition, one based on what was needed. Her rigid posture sagged, the fight draining out of her. She looked at her youngest sister, truly looked at her for the first time since the revelation, and saw not a traitor, but a leader in her own right, one who was strong enough to admit her fear. She didn't answer. She couldn't, but she gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was enough. The glacier had begun to thaw. The alert from the Kronos probe was not a scream, but a whisper. Stationed at the very edge of the galaxy, in the cold, dark space known as the Terminus, its sole purpose was to listen. For 3 years, it had sent back nothing but the gentle hiss of background radiation. Then the hiss changed. It was a subtle shift in entropy, a slight deadening of the quantum foam. To a normal sensor, it was nothing. To the archive, it was the sound of an approaching appetite. The probe went silent 1 hour later. The War Council convened in the archive's nexus. It was the first true meeting of the Sentinel Alliance. The Vorlag Empress appeared as a towering, regal hologram, her features stern but her eyes holding a new, thoughtful light. Roman and Vera stood at the center of the dais, with Tyleth and Vexara at their sides. They were joined by Vorlag fleet admirals and the crystalline envoys of the Signian Confederacy. The static is growing, Tyleth reported, her voice calm but her blue fingers flying across her console. The entity is waking. Based on the Archive's projections, it will reach the Outer Rim in less than 5 standard years. "We must strike now," boomed Admiral Korg, a veteran of 100 reclamation campaigns. "Assemble the Grand Fleet. We will meet this devourer with a wall of plasma." "A wall it will consume," Roman stated flatly. All eyes turned to him. "The Archive's data is clear. The devourer does not feed on matter or energy as we understand it. It feeds on information, on complexity, on life itself. The more you throw at it, the stronger it becomes. A fleet action would be suicide. You would be feeding the fire." "Then what do you propose, human?" Korg sneered, his prejudice still simmering beneath the surface. "That we hide?" "No," Roman said. "We learn. Humanity fought this thing to a standstill once before. Not by overpowering it, but by outthinking it." He gestured, and a new schematic bloomed in the air between them. It was a ship, but it looked like no vessel any of them had ever seen. It was a sleek, needle-like craft, but its hull was a complex, shifting lattice of crystalline structures and resonant chambers. "The Vorlog build ships to project force," Roman explained. "This ship is designed to project a concept. The Devourer is a being of pure destructive static. The only way to fight static is with a perfect resonant signal." "A song?" the Cygnian envoy chimed, its crystalline body vibrating with the thought. "In a manner of speaking," Roman agreed. "The ship, the Ode, will not carry traditional weapons. Its core is a psychoharmonic resonator, powered by the Archive itself. It will be crewed by a small, specialized team. Their mission will not be to fight the Devourer, but to get close enough to understand its nature, to find its fundamental frequency, and to broadcast a countersignal. Not to destroy it, but to pacify it, to teach it a new state of being." The Vorlog admirals stared in stunned silence. The idea was insane. It was art, philosophy, and theoretical physics turned into a military strategy. It was so utterly human. "The energy requirements would be immense," Tyleth murmured, her mind already racing. "But the Archive's zero-point core could sustain it. The navigation would require a hybrid of Vorlag instinct and human improvisational logic." "My warriors can defend the ship," Vexara added, her eyes gleaming with the challenge of a new kind of fight. Admiral Korg looked to his Empress, his expression one of disbelief. The Empress was silent for a long moment, her holographic eyes fixed on Roman. "This is your way, then?" she asked. "To fight a war with a poem?" "We fight with the one thing the Devourer cannot consume," Roman said. "Creativity." Vera stepped forward, her hand resting on Roman's arm. "Majesty," she said, her voice clear and strong. "For millennia, we have known only one way, the way of the sword. The Guardian offers us another, the way of the mind. I believe in his way." The Empress looked at her youngest daughter, at the human at her side, at the impossible ship hanging in the air. She saw a future she had never imagined for her people. "Build it," she commanded. Just as the council was about to adjourn, the doors to the Nexus slid open. Keldara stood there, dressed not in her exile's rags, but in the crisp black uniform of a Vorlag commander. Her face was pale, but her eyes were clear. She walked stiffly to her sister's side, taking her place just behind Vexara. She said nothing. She didn't have to. Her presence was her answer. The weight of the coming war settled upon them that night. In their quarters, the silence was heavy, filled with the immensity of the task ahead. Roman stood at the window, watching the Alliance shipyards in orbit, where massive fabricator arms were already weaving the first crystalline struts of the Ode. He felt a familiar chill, the cold dread of a sentinel facing an overwhelming foe. But this time he was not alone. "It's a beautiful design," Vera's thought echoed in his mind as she wrapped her arms around him from behind, her cheek pressing against his tattooed back. "It looks like one of your musical instruments, a violin." He placed his hands over hers, feeling the steady rhythm of her pulse. "That's the idea. The universe is a string. We just have to find the right note to play." He felt her fear, a sharp, cold spike beneath her calm exterior. Fear for him, for their new life, for the future. He turned in her arms, his hands cupping her face. Her amethyst eyes were dark, searching his. "I am afraid," she whispered aloud, giving voice to the thought. "I know," he said, his thumb stroking her cheek. "So am I." He leaned in and kissed her, a kiss of fierce, desperate tenderness. It was a confirmation of everything they had become. The memories of their mental fusion were always there, just beneath the surface, a shared landscape of the soul. He still felt the phantom sting of her rigorous training, the cold discipline of her upbringing. She, in turn, could feel the phantom warmth of the human sun on her skin, the lingering ache of his century of solitude. Their intimacy was a constant, flowing current between them. He lowered his head, his lips tracing the elegant line of her jaw, moving to the sensitive, pointed tip of her ear. A soft gasp escaped her, a tremor of pleasure that he felt as a faint echo in his own body. Stay with me, she thought, the plea a raw, open thing in the sanctuary of his mind. Don't leave me alone again. He pulled back, his eyes holding hers. Never. He lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing and carried her to their bed. The love they made was not a gentle romance. It was a furious, passionate affirmation of life against the encroaching dark. It was a silent promise, made in the language of touch and thought, of skin against skin. He saw the fierce Vorlag soldier she had been, and he cherished her strength. She saw the lonely human guardian he had been, and she cherished his resilience. In each other, they found not a refuge from the coming storm, but the strength to face it. Later, they stood at the window again, wrapped in a single cloak, watching the nascent form of their impossible ship take shape among the stars. It was a fragile, beautiful thing, a testament to a human idea embraced by an alien empire. He was no longer a relic, but a leader. She was no longer a weapon, but a bridge. Humanity, through its last son and its first new daughter, had given the galaxy a new kind of hope. He felt her thought, a quiet question full of love and a sliver of fear for the future. He answered it with a thought of his own, a simple, unshakable promise that echoed in the shared space of their souls. Whatever comes, we go first, together.